Welcome to the field. My name is JJ. Round one, week two, whatever you want to call it, is done. A full slate of footy is behind us, and it was a very, very interesting, a somewhat fascinating weekend of footy. It started way back when Richmond Carlton, and we'll talk about the Blues and their close finishes in a moment, but it finished with the Brisbane Lions. Last year's grand final runners-up, they are now zipping two. They are now zipping two. They kicked the first 4 goals of the contest against Fremantle in Perth and then did not offer a yelp. So they're zipping two, of course, that cough up against Carlton in round 0 and then a loss to Fremantle on the road. They've got a bye this week and then they've got a clash with Collingwood, who are also zipping two. So the grand finalists could meet each other at Zippin 3 and Zippin 2. The Pies face the Saints this week. So we'll have a good look at both grand finalists, the participants in that grand final, and work out what's what. But it was great to have the Melbourne AFL fields back, 80,000 in the house on Thursday night. Richmond Carlton backed up by 70 plus Collingwood and Sydney. I was at that game live. It was fantastic to get to the footy. 400 plus thousand across the weekend, a new record for the AFL. So congrats to everyone who got involved. There was some fantastic weather and there was some excellent footy played as well. I want to go back to a conversation had by Lee Matthews, generally considered the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And I'm not here to dispute that. But what I am here to dispute is the notion that Collingwood are still celebrating their premiership, or they celebrated for too long, or their eyes are still on their old prize and not on the prize that's up for grabs in 2024. My view, now look, I've never won an AFL premiership. I played in a losing grand final, played in a local premiership last year, if that counts. My view would be, what's the point of winning a premiership if you can't celebrate it? Now, I understand that you can celebrate for too long. And if you drink beers and eat pizza for 10 weeks and come back 6 kilos overweight and out of shape and you don't rectify that, then certainly that is not the right way to go about it. But my view would be, what is the point of winning a premiership if you can't celebrate it? As professional athletes across any sport, you're asked after a loss to search from within, to look within, to really stew on your result, to really go over everything with a fine-tooth comb and to look at that result and that loss and why you lost. Was it your preparation? Was it this, that, and the other? You're expected to look at a loss and review a loss for a long time. So why wouldn't you equally celebrate a win for a long time? Why wouldn't you celebrate the achievement, the enormity of growing a team together, growing a system, growing alongside Craig McRae? Why wouldn't you celebrate that? Now, again, there's a tipping point, but I've seen nothing from Collingwood, and don't give me zipping too. Seen nothing from Collingwood in their behaviour to suggest they've celebrated for too long. I think anything that you could, if there's anything to go by from a social media point of view, all they do is train. Those boys, Mitchell and Quain, or the Dacos boys, Scott Pendlebury, all they do is train. So I think that's largely nonsense. Most of that is largely nonsense. So if you can't celebrate winning a premiership, what's the point of winning a premiership? That's the way I see it. So that's just a little follow-up from a conversation that piqued my interest last week. Now, some round one follow-up. Now, I spoke about the grand finalists. Collingwood, to me, I was live at that game. Sydney looked way sharper. They looked sharper getting on the loose ball, which is contested possession. So often, we think of contested possessions or contested ball and the differential against your opponent as who's cracking in harder. But loose ball gets is one way of counting contested possession. And Sydney were just way quicker, way sharper on any loose balls. Isaac Kenny was chief among that. His power to go from the initial contest to get on the loose ball is as good as it gets in the AFL at the moment. There's a player across on the Pies who's pretty good in that space, and that's Jordan De Goey. But he was powerless against Isaac Heaney. Heaney's a man on a mission in the midfield. He put together another 2 or 3 vote game, whichever way you want to see it. Him and Chad Warner. Warner was equally sharp. Goulden sharp. Campbell looks fantastic. The Swans just looked way quicker, way more elusive. They're able to get more numbers to each contest. And if you go back and watch that game, certainly the portions of the game where Sydney dominated, they were able to get 3-on-1, 3-on-2, 4-on-3. They're able to outnumber at most contests. And whenever you can have more bodies at the contest than the opposition, the odds are in your favour. And certainly you combine that with a few really uncharacteristic mistakes from Darcy Moore and a few other guys. Will Hoskin-Elliott had a really poor mistake in the back half as well. When you combine those things together, you start to see what you are seeing, because then you've got the defensive group. Now, we know it's minus Nathan Murphy, and he is a stabiliser in that defence. He comes forward. Darcy Moore comes forward to defend no matter what. That's the way defence, same as an Alex Rance type. But Nathan Murphy defends a little bit like Stephen May. He's an anchor. He likes to keep everything in front of him. And with that, he's able to yell out to Quaynor or Moore or Howe or Maynard and say, turn your head, swivel your head. There's a swan in behind you. But when Moore's the anchor, Moore's coming forward, then there's no one around to look at those Sydney guys. And the amount of times live at the ground, Sydney got out and got in behind them. Now, Logan McDonald got a few goals when he got out the back, but there were other times where Papley and Warner and a few other guys were able to get out the back, and they didn't even capitalise on them. So it could have been much uglier if the Swans were able to get through a few more times. But certainly that Collingwood team defence, that back 6 or 7, the way some are coming forward to defend and the way some are retreating, it's just putting holes and picking holes in their defensive group. And Sydney are one team, the way they kick the ball around the ground, who will certainly find those holes. So that's the main reason. So the loose ball gets, the sharpness around the ball, and certainly the way they're defending would be two issues for Collingwood. From Brisbane's point of view, it's a bit of a step right back to 3 or 4 years ago. They've been one of the better teams, one of the elite teams for 4 or 5 years. Last year, I thought they turned the corner. Dunkley was really important in that space about making the game easier for each other. So putting someone else into space, using your voice to make the game easier for your teammate. So telling him that he's got some time and space to find a teammate, to look and be his eyes and find that teammate for him and tell him where to kick the ball. It feels like everyone at Brisbane at the moment would be screaming for the footy because they're so talented and each player has got such mercurial talent. They're all saying, just give it to me. Just let me sort it out. But against Fremantle, that wasn't getting it done because Fremantle were really stable behind the ball. You had Luke Ryan just placing himself in line with the footy. He took a heap of marks, a fair few intercept marks. You had Clark and you had Young. You had a few other guys back there who were really solid. Alex Pearce, of course, had his hands full with Danaher, but certainly impacted the game from Fremantle's perspective as well. So Brisbane need to get back to that really selfless mindset, the mindset of going into a game not thinking, I'm going to get mine, the mindset of thinking, I'm going to make someone else's job easier. I'm going to give Zach Bailey the footy because I know he makes us better. I'm going to bring Charlie Cameron into the game and just spot him up inside forward 50 because I know he gets close attention from defenders. I'm going to run past for a handball receive and I'll see the pressure coming at me. So I'll say, no, don't handball it to me. But at the moment, Brisbane's players are saying, just give me the ball no matter what. I'll just make it happen because I'm so talented. But talent only gets you so far, as we've seen from them. So I think Brisbane will just give themselves a bit of a reality check. I certainly thought the way Lachie Neale came out and spoke post that Carlton loss, I thought we'd see a real turnaround from them. But certainly, if it wasn't for a Harris Andrews down back, they would have lost that game by a lot more. They could have lost that game by 10 goals, and they'd be the lead story on Monday or Tuesday of this week. They do miss Kadeem Coleman. We knew they would. As soon as he injured that knee, we knew they'd miss someone. Dane Zorko went back in the last quarter. He was the one I thought should have went back at the start because he's a great ball user. He's a really aggressive kick. He gets the ball through the air quickly as well, so he doesn't lob those kicks around, give the defense time to either intercept it or get in position. He punches the ball through the air. So he's the one I would have moved back straight away. I wonder, though, Zach Bailey was quiet. He kicked a couple of goals, but he only had 13, 14 disposals. He played on the ball a little bit. I wonder whether you can move Bailey on ball permanently. And is it Hugh McCluggage that goes to halfback for the time being? Is it him that goes back for 24/7 and stabilises that back six and gives them an opportunity to have a ball user coming out of the back half? Wilmot's a runner. He's not necessarily a creator with ball in hand. He creates with speed. McKenna's pretty good in that space, but he can be a little bit too brazen as well. I think they just need someone who can get that first kick away and get a mark and settle the game down and then give Brisbane an opportunity to attack from there. So I'd be putting Zorko back to half back or bringing Bailey up as a permanent midfielder, he or Rayner, and then moving McCluggage into defence just to stabilise that back 6 or 7. It feels like a while ago, but I want to talk about Cardiac Carlton. Now, Cardiac Carlton comes from, I think, Cardiac Kemba. So Kemba Walker is an NBA player who was a fantastic NCAA basketball player who was famous for his late game heroics for the University of Connecticut. Now, they called him Cardiac Kemba because, of course, it fits beautifully with the name Kemba. Cardiac Carlton works quite nicely as well. So their past 6 games, they have had a loss, of course, a prelim final in there as well. But round 22 last year, a 4-point win over the D's. Round 23, a 4-point win over Gold Coast. The first final, the elimination final, a 6-point win over Sydney. The qualifying final was a 2-point win. Sorry, the second semi-final that was a 2-point win over the D's. So 2 finals and 2 games late last year, of course. They had the 1-point win against Brisbane in round 0 and the 5-point win against Richmond last year. And the year previous to that, Collingwood played in a heap of close games. And we said, they're lucky. Well, I didn't. A lot of people said, they're just lucky. They won't win all those games. Well, they did win all those games, and they won a premiership in a close game. So you can win all those games. You can win most of those games because it's a skill, it's an art form, it's an ability to control the late game situation. And you will have seen, if you go back to the dying 2 minutes in that game, you will have seen 2 or 3 Carlton players. I know there was a little bit of a jumper clash, but Carlton players diving on the footy, almost tackling themselves, almost tackling each other. Richmond were quite clever in the fact that it didn't just pile on and make it easy for the umpire to say, well, that's a ball up. There's 6 or 7 players in the contest. Richmond were quite good, but Carlton were able to fumble the ball around at ground level, not dive on the ball, but still have control of it. It was a really, really well executed final minute or so from Carlton. Therefore, Cardiac Carlton absolutely serves them perfectly. We know they're without Sam Walsh, who I think's their best player. And the stories or the reports about him are getting very, very unnerving. They're without Jacob Wiedering, their most important player down back, and he will stabilise that back 6 like you will not believe. And we know they're without their spiritual leader, their moral compass in Sam Doherty. Now, they're not getting Doherty back, and Walsh might not be back for some time, but Wiedering is allegedly or reportedly not far away, so they get him back. And I love what that back 6 has done thus far. You've got guys like Kemp, who is having a great start to the season. McGovern's probably in career best form. He's confident. He's using the ball quite nicely. Newman was great last year. He's continued that on. Sard the same. Zach Williams is back. Once you get Wiedering back alongside Lewis Young and you make his job a bit easier, then Carlton's back 6 or 7 looks really, really solid. It looks versatile. You get Jack Martin back at the other end of the ground. Kerno's up and about. Mackay started the season in ripping fashion. The sky's the limit for the Blues. I told you they were the real deal. I picked them to make the grand final, and I'm not jumping off them at all. The other element has been Tom De Koning. Now, when Mark Pitnett in the off-season, early in the off-season, or might have even been midway through last year, signed a 4-year contract extension, we all thought, oh, that's it. Tom De Koning's gone. He's gone. He's leaving. He's committed to Geelong or St Kilda or Sydney, but he stayed. He stayed. And no one's crying about the Pitnett contract extension now, are they? Because De Koning looks fantastic as the lead ruckman. There will be a role for Big Mark throughout the season. I think there'll be the odd occasion where they play both of them in the ruck, maybe against Melbourne. But I don't think there's a role for Pitnett when it comes down to a final or a big game or a must-win contest, because De Koning thrives and he's getting better and better by being the number 1 ruck. And I think it's helping Harry Mackay as well. It's giving that giving him that point of view and understanding that, okay, 10 minutes into the first quarter, if I haven't seen the footy as a forward, I'm going into the ruck anyway. So I'm going to get the opportunity to be around the ball, to get my hands on the ball, to get a couple of hit outs, to lay a tackle or two. So I think that's feeding into the confidence for Harry Mackay. So Carlton, they're the real deal in 2024. Make no mistake about it. I watched, commentated for AFL Nation, St Kilda and Geelong at the Cattery in front of the new Joel Selwood Stand. It was a good game. It was a very scrappy, contested, hard-fought game, and it was separated by two guys, really. Ollie Dempsey in his 8th game, a young gun with bright pink boots and long blonde hair, and Jeremy Cameron. Dempsey was absolutely sensational in the game where there was a lot of tackling, a lot of collisions, a lot of fumbling. Dempsey was so clean, 15 disposals. He kicked 3 goals. He got them going early in the game. He had a crucial goal assist, a really creative goal assist in the 4th quarter, squaring the ball up to Zach Tui. He took 7 really nifty marks. He's an athletic type. And his output in terms of his cleanliness and his execution on a night where most couldn't was really, it stood out to me. I gave him the 3 votes for AFL Nation. Such was his performance, not because he's a young player, and I thought he outperformed, I guess, his career to date, but the fact he was able to have 15 touches, the score assists, and the goals, I thought he was the most impactful player on the ground. The other one who was impactful was Jeremy Cameron. And on the 7 AFL socials this week on Twitter or X and Instagram, I take a bit of a closer look at Jeremy Cameron's role and a term that the Cats use or call roaming Jerry. I'm not sure why it's not roaming Jeremy, but it's roaming Jerry, where Cameron has the license to get up the field and get involved in the play. And he did that a lot on Saturday night. He had 21 disposals, still managed 5 scoring shots. He kicked 2 of the great goals you'll see, particularly the first goal late in the first quarter. It was a phenomenal goal and a great celebration. But roaming Jerry, as I allude to and as I highlight on the 7 AFL socials, is something that the Cats have allowed Cameron to do to get himself in the game. He's a key forward who gets close attention in that forward 50. So it gives him the ability to go up the ground, get the ball, and feel good about himself. So make sure you go and have a look at that on the 7 AFL socials on Instagram and on X. I'll make sure I retweet them and repost them as well. My old mate Danger, I want to talk about his late goal, his game-sealing, game-clinching goal from outside 50. Firstly, I didn't know the old boy could still kick it that far, but I reckon if you asked Chris Scott, now he'll probably say publicly, no, I had every faith in Danger kicking the goal. But if you asked most coaches, I think the ideal situation there, so there's about 40 seconds remaining in the contest. He kicks the goal with 39 seconds to go. I think he's got the ball with about 46 seconds to go on the clock. If he can find 2 or 3 uncontested marks, the game's over. And I think that's what most coaches would suggest. Now, he's within range, and he kicks the goal. So he's a hero, and he's done the right thing. But if he misses that set shot, and from there, it's probably a 30, 35% chance of being kicked. Maybe 30% of AFL players would kick that goal. If he misses that, it falls short or it's a behind. That's a turnover. That's in the hands of the Saints. And they've got Bonner, and they've got Wanganeen Miller, and they've got Hill, and then they've got King, who was just starting to hit his straps. They've got enough firepower to run that ball from one end to the other. So he's a hero because he kicked the goal, but I reckon in his heart of hearts, or in the coach's hearts of hearts, they might have suggested to him to have passed that off and just killed the clock. But to the spoils go the victor, and there's no doubt he is a hero. Have a look at the goal. He'll want me to show it, so here it is, Dangerfield from downtown.
Had a shot in this term, pushed it wide. Steely face. It's coming back. It's coming back. And it's through.
So there you go. Danger kicks the sealer. He asked me to play the video on the show, and there you go. He was big too. He had a big performance, plenty of clearances, plenty of disposals. He looked nice and healthy, nice and fit across the weekend. He wasn't the only one across the weekend doing big things. How about big Alex Pearce, the skipper of the Dockers, collecting 19 disposals in his team's big win over Brisbane? What about his direct opponent, Joe Danaher? He had 20 touches. What about Mitch McGovern? I spoke about him earlier. His 26 touches against the Tigers, probably a career high. I need to check that. Andy McGrath, the vice captain for the Bombers, he had 30 in their big win, their crucial win over the Hawks. And Caleb Sarong topped them all, the Docker, the gun from Freo. He had 46 touches on Sunday night against the Brisbane Lions. And the reason I know all that is thanks to StatMate. StatMate is the newest app on the market, which can help you find all of these massive performances when you're building your weekend footy multis or having a bet on the footy. They've got some great data, some great analytics on these players, and they'll find you the best prices as well. So make sure you download StatMate on the App Store. Give it a free trial. There's an opportunity there for a free trial. StatMate, StatMate. Make sure you download it, and you can get some assistance, some of the best assistance when it comes to finding you a winner and a big-time performer on the weekend. Speaking of big-time performers, Clayton Oliver was that. His name was spoken about more than any other player throughout the offseason, but his performance was incredible against the Dogs. We know the Dogs are pretty powerful around the ball, but Oliver is more powerful. I remember speaking to Matthew Egan, who was at the D's, then come to the Cats, which is where I cross paths with him, and he's now the GM of coaching or something similar at the Dogs. And we were talking about, as a coaching group, the Melbourne midfield, and he was telling us about Gawn and Petrarca and Oliver and the way they go about it, Jack Viney. And the thing that stuck with me about Oliver and made me love him even more is Egan said he can go for the longest. So Petrarca, can go in bursts, but he'll need to go forward or he'll need to go off to the bench. Oliver can play as a mid, as a hard-running, contested mid for a long period of play. If you go and have a look at his play periods, they're long. He can play as a midfielder for 15, 16, 17 minutes. Most can only really do about 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes at the most. There's a few that can go longer, but he's one who's just a bull. And I thought he changed what Melbourne were and are, the way he played that game on Sunday afternoon, So, the numbers are fantastic. 35 disposals, goal assists, clearances, inside 50s. But I just love the way he was able to run away from the contest. Typically when Clayton Oliver's having 35 disposals, he's probably having 18 to 20 contested possessions. On the weekend, he had only 10. So he had 25 uncontested possessions. And to me, that's a man that's covering the ground. That's a man who's in the clearance area, but then bursting away from clearance and burning Bontempelli and Treloar and Libber and those guys away from that first phase or that first contest. I love the way he performed. He makes the game easier for his Melbourne forwards. He's not an unbelievably accurate kick. He's not a creative kick, but he runs at the game. His movement makes the Melbourne forwards move, and therefore you get nice, fast entries and dangerous entries, and we saw that from him on the weekend. I think he's the best running big mid in the competition. The only other two that I can think of, Tim Taranto. Now, Taranto's not as big, but he's certainly a contested beast, and he can run. He probably runs too hard and too much. He needs to pick his moments a little bit better. I thought on Thursday night he was really in between some contests because he just worn himself out trying to run from contest to contest. And the other one who runs incredibly well, he doesn't stop much either, Tom Green. He probably can't play for as longer periods as Oliver, but he's going to get there. And he, being only 23, another 30 plus on the weekend, kicked a goal. He doesn't stop moving either. So he's in the contest, in the stoppage, often the first possession winner from the ruck contest, feeding it to teammates with his great hands, and then getting to the next contest. And that's what the game is these days, contest to contest to contest, the guys who can run and get up and down the ground. He is absolutely one of those. Tom Green, Tim Taranto, and Clayton Oliver. And it's fantastic to see Oliver back in business. Two quick topics I want to touch on before I get out of here. Luke Beveridge. Now, his selection has always been or often been surprising. He's picked guys from nowhere. He's left guys out of the team. He's doing it again. So round one for the Dogs, Jack McRae, despite a couple of preseason games or practice games in the VFL, not selected. Excuse me. And it was asked of him, and he sort of had some interesting answers about him not quite being ready, and others having better preseasons. And then Caleb Daniel, this is more surprising to me, was the sub. Now, we outside the club only have 1% of the information that Luke Beveridge and his coaching staff have. But to me, Melbourne's strengths in no particular order are their midfield dominance and power and their straight line defence. So May and Lever behind the ball, in line with the ball, intercepting. So McRae can help with your midfield grunt and ability to win the footy to offset Oliver and Viney and Petrarca. And Daniel's one of the more creative, short, intermediate kicks in the competition who can hit a target and catch May and Lever out of position. The Dogs just kicked it back to May all day. So having those two in the game, I think, would have been beneficial. Now Daniel was subbed into the game in the second half, had 12 disposals in bugger all game time. He had more disposals in the game than Riley West, than Buku Karmas, than Caulfield, than Gallagher, than Leighton Vandermeer. Now, some of those guys play different roles, but don't tell me there wasn't a spot for Caleb Daniel in that 22 ahead of some of those guys or any of those guys, one of those guys, so that he could be creative. He could play behind the ball and he could make things happen. It's one thing at selection to be dicey and willing to keep everyone on their toes. And sometimes it works out. Sometimes it gives everyone that reminder, hey, your position's not a lock. Your position's not guaranteed to you. And it can make performance really spike. But other times when you're not necessarily sure or believing of the reasons why these guys aren't playing, it can make people walk on eggshells. And no one knows what's what. And my mail is, at the Doggies, from a selection point of view, from a personnel point of view, no one knows what's what. So it's going to be fascinating to follow them. They have to bounce back this week. They've got Gold Coast in Ballarat. They've been a good team in Ballarat. So Gold Coast arrived 2-0. So that's going to be an interesting game. And the last topic I want to hit on was Fremantle coach Justin Longmuir. I was one thinking that he was the coach under the most pressure going into the season. And my view hasn't changed that much. Their performance against Brisbane was great. But the Dockers came out surprisingly last week and announced that they'd re-signed Longmuir or extended Longmuir for one season. It's not a commitment long-term to him. What I think it is a $200,000 price tag on an answer. So Longmuir would be unlikely, unlike maybe Chris Scott or Ross Lyon or Alistair Clarkson. Those coaches probably have full payouts, full termination clauses. But the AFL and the clubs were able to have a big win over the coaches, and they've been able to bring these payouts back to 6 and 3 months. So let's say Longmuir's got a 3-month termination clause. Now, I don't think he would have had a lot of leverage in that conversation. So he probably says, well, I'd love a 6 or a full termination clause. But he's probably got a 3-month termination clause. So if he's on 600 grand or 700 grand for the year, which I think he would be around there, maybe a bit more, he might only be owed 3 months if they were to sack him early. Therefore, it's a $150,000 to $250,000 payout versus $600,000, $800,000. So I think they've just bought the ability to now answer any questions about his pressure or his performance or whether he'll be the coach long term. They can now say Justin is contracted to the club for next season. The pressure's off. Now, we'll eventually get to that point, but I think that's what they've done. It's a shrewd piece of business from Freo. Instead of them saying, no, we believe in Justin, but having nothing to fall back on, now they can say he's contracted for next season. Next question. It's a shrewd bit of business, and I think it was a smart little move from Fremantle, but it doesn't change much to this point anyway. That's enough. We've covered plenty of ground. A quick look at the grand finalists, can they bounce back? Some of the better performing teams, some of the poorer performing teams, and a few things on the periphery. Make sure you check out the 7 socials for Roaming Jerry. A little snapshot into the role played by Jeremy Cameron. As I said earlier, make sure you download StatMate. Go to the App Store and download StatMate. It'll help you find winners when you're having a flutter on the footy. That is for sure. It's one of the best new apps in the business. And make sure you subscribe to The Field. Make sure you tell a friend as well. Thanks for watching. Round 1 is in the books. Round 2 will be coming straight at you.